What's good, everybody? What's happening, good people? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door podcast with you boys, Jeremy Hilton, Brandon Brown. Um, we're fresh off of a pretty powerful and impactful event here in Maine. We were up in Bangor, Maine, a few days ago for the Black Balloon Day, a memorial for Mainers. Coming together with community, expressing some collective grief about all the people that have died from overdose in the last year in the state. We're one of the epicenters of the opiate epidemic from the very beginning. And we've got some really amazing community organizations that have put on this Black Balloon Day now for 5 years. And, I'm going to kick it to Jeremy. But first, I'm just going to say that I've been out of prison for 3.5 years. This is the third Black Balloon Day event that I've gone to and spoken at. And every year it grows. It gets exponentially bigger. They need a new, bigger venue. More people are coming out that have been touched by this epidemic, that have lost loved ones, that are coming to, memorialize the people they've lost. And it's just a really beautiful thing to see. It's a tough place to be because we are expressing grief. We've lost friends to overdose that, were really important, pivotal people in our lives. But at the same time, to come together in community, to express that grief, to be able to be with one another, and perhaps even more importantly, to talk about how do we get to the solution? How do we stop losing people? What is the advocacy we're doing? What is the legislation we're fighting for? How do we support one another? How do we grow the recovery presence and community in our state? Is really just a beautiful thing to witness. And for you, Jeremy, going up on behalf of Recovery Connections in Maine and like being able to connect with people and see the community, I'm just interested in like how that event felt for you to see our people out there in numbers, like talking about issues that really, really matter.
Well, for me, it was a really it was powerful in a lot of ways because you know I've been in treating addiction in Lewiston. I was thinking about the other day. It was like I think I got my first job in 2010, so it's 2025 now. So it's like 15 years in, and the stigma and the isolation of recovery and treatment and stuff like that. Um, it was unheard of. You know what I mean? It's like I think about when I was like looking for. I wasn't looking for treatment ever when I was in active use because there wasn't any around. Like that's like there was maybe you go to the hospital or something, and but that's never something that I was interested in. And to see where it's gone now, like it was like it was pretty wild 'cause it's like, this statewide event. So to have like these grassroots guys like Randy and Ryan and Shay, they have really done a lot of great work, like organizing and getting the community together and like having a place that you grow. There's like a lot of music, so some tremendous performers. Like we saw that, the speakers and all that stuff. It was just a really great thing to be a part of, and like really, I was really humbled by like I'm watching it all go down and stuff. And then so the other side of it is that you think about all the people that we've lost along the way, and it's like it's you know what I mean? Think about the people, and it's like so many, like 15 years in this thing, and you know what I mean? It's one of the biggest crises our state's probably seeing. You know what I mean? Is addiction, how many people have died. So it's like, and I think the celebration there is about the hope for the people that are in the room, and like that there is hope, and then there is community. And I think that's something that we need to talk about a lot more, is like the community aspect of reentry.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the beautiful things about this event is that it brings together people and gives them an opportunity to be heard, right? And like,
100%.
I just look back at how many of the speakers talked about how you have to own your narrative and you have to be like, almost shameless about the shitty things that you've done and that you've been through, because until we can say those things, we can't really paint the perspective for people who don't understand addiction and overdose and these things, to really understand like the depths of what this crisis is doing to our communities, right? And I remember one speaker very vividly saying like, that she struggled with the idea of this as a celebration. And to really name, like, we're here to mourn, we're here to grieve, we're here to do these things, and, like, I'm angry, at the loss of my loved one, and I sometimes wake up and I go through this emotional roller coaster, and it will never go away. And, like, honoring and respecting the truth of that is really important, but also, like you said, never forgetting that, like, we do have to celebrate a community of people who have been stigmatized for decades and decades, coming together to let their voices be heard, to say the only way this is gonna change is if we spearhead the movement, right? And I just wanna give a shout out to some of the people that you named, because Ryan Page, at Access Direct Recovery Network, Randy Beard with the Recover Together, and so many other, like, on the ground advocates who are foot
Well, the room
soldiers.
was filled with, resources
Yeah.
too, you know what I mean? Like, there was a ton of resources there. It was like, that's the cool thing about
Well,
it, is that, like, it was so open too. It was like, it wasn't about one pathway to
mhm,
recovery. It wasn't about one thing. It was just like really like the community coming together in that way. It was like, it's a beautiful thing, man, that, for them guys to put in the hard work to make something, to pull something like that off. Um, and Access Direct does a lot of great work too. Ryan Page, um, they started doing it just because they cared for people,
yeah,
and they didn't want, you know what I mean? They didn't want to see it, and so now he's got, Access Direct. You get a hold of him, and he gets people into treatment, and,
mhm,
built a network, and he's recently got on 211, so he's gonna be a resource on 211. So he's done a great job, and this
mhm,
is all from grassroots, like, really just sheer heart and
mhm,
determination from a group of marginalized people. It's like actually gives you goosebumps when you start thinking
mhm,
about like the movement that is really in Maine, in general. Just you think about just Maine, like not a lot of places are doing it like
yeah.
this. It's like it's just not happening across the country.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful parts about the work that Ryan and, like, and Randy with Recover Together and so many, like, a handful of other people are really doing that you're pointing out too, is, like, they've got their grassroots thing that they're connecting people with, but they've also got this online presence where when somebody's in Northern Maine 6 hours away and needs treatment in Lewiston, they're tapping into that community to say, who can go get this person, right? Who can show up? Who can pay it forward? Who can give it to the next person? And it's like, I see those things online. I'm part of these message groups and I see how powerful it is for people to actually like rise to the occasion. But when you get everybody in that room for that event together, you like you said, the goosebumps turn into something else. It turns into this, like, I feel like at those events, anything is possible with our
Yeah.
people coming together
Um,
to say, like, we're not gonna wait for people in power to change our reality, like, we're gonna demand. And there's another quote that was said is, "While politicians are talking, our people are dying." Right? And so this event is just a signal of us coming together to say we're not going to accept it anymore. And how can we not just use the collective power we have in the room, but how can we plug people in to the resources that are in the room too? Because I think that might be like one of the unsung parts of this event is all of these resources they're in there. And if you're struggling, you can literally go see 25 different people that can say, I can help you today. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And, one thing that I want to point out too is like there is so much grief in the room. There is so much pain in the room. There is so much sadness and anger and all of these emotions that are really like hard to confront and deal with. But like when I was listening to people speak, it hit me super hard that like we as a community have an option, and it's to turn our grief into growth, right? It's to turn our pain into power, and it's to make sure that we always take every opportunity to make our words turn into wisdom for our community. And that's what I think about those three things, how much growth, power, and wisdom was in the room. And I drove away feeling like, again, anything is possible. We can change this. And we're fighting an uphill battle, and that has to be recognized, right? That every year for the past 3, 4 years, more people have died from overdose. And it's because our politics is not working. It's because our rulemaking and our all of these like things at the state level.
but I also, it's really like I challenge that a little bit too, because it's like it doesn't matter, I don't think, who the politician is, who's in the White House, who's doing this, who's doing that. It's really like there was, like I said, I would say this again, there was no community like this,
Mhm.
15 years ago. It wasn't there.
Yeah.
So really what's happened is that there's this swell of energy, right? There's this like ground there's been a swell of energy. And it's really been all on the heart of these guys. You know what I mean? The heart of the people that more people are starting to realize that there's strength in numbers. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? No one's coming to save us.
Yeah.
The government ain't coming to save us.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? The pharmaceutical companies ain't coming to save us. The cops ain't coming to, like, it's really the community, and that's where I feel like is really starting to take shape now, is like more and more people are starting to realize that there's more strength in us than there is in so some ways to how do you fight the system is like we don't have to participate in it. We can just be together and fight it and just grow together. You know what I'm saying? And not and so like it does that supersedes
Mhm.
politics, right? That supersedes funding. It supersedes all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like you look at them, yeah, I see, our building is really, in the middle of Lewiston, and, there's a homeless population that's kinda close to our building. They're around, and, one of the things that's like, um, they stick together so much, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? They're looking out for each other so much, you know what I'm saying? They survive together, you know what I'm saying? And, you know what I mean? And when you think about that, like, if people in this situation can do that, like, you know what I mean? You think about that same thing and it grows. You know what I mean? Like just the energy of doing something together and like showing up. One of the coolest things about it is that like I was there and I seen people that had been doing the same work as me for 15 years. He's still there, still showing up. It's the
Still
same
vibing.
people. He's still giving the same hugs and it's like, but there's more and more people
Yeah.
surrounding that. And that's like the best thing that we can do for each other. So that's the stuff that supersedes like that energy is greater than any other energy that the government could produce. Like that's the any of any law. Like the energy is what's really going to like create the community
Yeah.
that changes people's lives.
And it's about the connection piece, right? And we come back to that a lot on this podcast because we have to come back to it, right? Like we know that the thing that our systems are doing to us primarily are disconnecting us from one another and from people in our society. And so one of the most beautiful things too about this event is that you see people connecting that otherwise without this opportunity and shared experience that's narrated, they never would be able to connect. And I think about the different crowds of people that I saw in the room, right? And the different intersectionalities that they occupy. I saw this year more people that I was in prison with than any ever before, right? I saw more people that I was in prison with in the state of Maine at this event than I've seen since I got out in one single space because we all recognize that like we're all impacted by this, whether it was before we went to prison, when we got out, a family member passed away from addiction, and now it's something that we feel like we have to be present and advocate for. I saw people that are, like very successful and they lost a child to addiction that they don't fit the stigma, right? They don't fit the picture of what you think of when you think of an addict in there side by side with all sorts of different other people from walks the same different walks of life and like holding each other's essence and power together to fight this thing. And I think that's really the like you what you're talking about, the power of us as a community, as people will always supersede the sitting around waiting for a rule to change, right? Because at the end of the day, when we can tell our stories collectively, when we can show up and push the narrative about who is affected by addiction, that's where change is going to come because you're going to get people invested who otherwise
It
might.
reminds me of that movie. Remember that movie 300?
Mhm.
It reminds me of like that movie 300 when it was like they wanted they had enough will to befriend, you know what I mean? It was like, there's everybody loves the
Yeah.
underdog. You don't see a movie, right, with nothing going on. It's always the underdog that makes the best story, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And then you see, you know, a room full of underdogs, like, becoming successful, there is, like, so much connection and
Yeah.
power in that, you know what I mean? It's like, we ain't even supposed to be here. You know what I mean? We're on you know what I mean? Like, I felt like this for a long time. Like, I'm on borrowed time. I'm in the bonus round right now. You know what I mean? I'm like hitting the, you know how you're running up check marks on the video game? Yeah, I say like I'm in the bonus round right now, man. It's like I'm grateful for every day that I have, right? So it's like, man, like if like you get so many people that have that same energy,
Yeah.
and it's a movement, man. It's like changes everything.
Yeah, and it's an amazing thing to feel too, because when you have a bunch of people who have at some point in their life lost everything, right? Like that's the bonus round mentality almost, right? It's like, man, I've been in the dumps before. Like I know what it's like, and I'm not going to be silenced because I'm in this bonus period where I'm going to
Well,
make sure that these
you
stories
can't
are
beat
heard.
somebody that won't lose. You know what I'm saying? That won't give up. You know, like you can't beat somebody that won't give up. You know, and it's like, and then you get like 7, 800 people that
Hmm.
won't give up at one time, you know what I'm saying, in the same room. It's like it's pretty astounding, like, when you really
Yeah.
you know what I mean, that's the type of energy that I was feeling, and then, it was, true too because I heard the performers
Yeah.
performing, talk about the same thing, be compelled to talk about, everything that they had gone through, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
and to have that shared experience, and like just want to give a shout out right to the guests on our last episode, Kalichi and Benjamin Lerner, right?
right, my guys.
To come up from out of state to really believe in the community in Maine and share their craft. This music that they're making that is very out loud and in your face about the struggles of addiction, but also the beauty of recovery is so powerful because it does remind us of the power that exists even beyond our immediate sphere, right? Like it
Well, I was just
exists
going
everywhere.
I went to dinner we went to dinner with Kalichi,
Mhm.
and I mean, Chad, it was the night before, and, I was sitting across the table from him, and he's got his head down, and he's, like, looking down, and, I'm thinking he's getting focused for the show.
Mhm.
He's getting locked in, you know what I mean? And then, like, he felt compelled to talk about his anxiety on the stage in front of all these
Mhm.
people, and, like, he, like, apologized for going, "Oh, I'm sorry that I didn't acknowledge, like, I have a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
anxiety, and, like, for a guy to get that vulnerable, that's a rapper on stage is like, I thought, and he felt moved to do that based on the energy and his experiences of what was going on. So that was like a beautiful part of it for me is to like listen to him get vulnerable that's like being a leader in that community. That's why the energy goes like it does because it gets contagious and then
Mhm.
like when people, is talented like that, can speak like that, they get moved to talk, and it just, like, it really, shapes, that energy that's there.
Yeah, and it's like the energy is almost birthed in like the vulnerability of it,
Yeah.
right? And like you're in this room.
Shared experience,
Yeah,
right?
you're in this room where people are actually getting to that vulnerable state to talk about something that's really hard, to create the connection, create the bond, which then translates into the power that you feel. It's like an electricity in the room, right?
Yeah, you just feel it. It's like there's hope here. There's something to move forward here, and the more that we can come together like that
Mhm.
is, it just builds, you know what I mean? I'm sure this year they must have had, I mean, it felt like 10,000 people were there, but there's probably, 500
Yeah,
or
around 500 or
700
so.
people, you know what I mean? I don't know, but, um, maybe next year there's 1,000
Yeah.
based on what happened this year, and then, you know what I mean, the thing grows, and then hopefully at some point we're down in Gillette or something, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And, that's the type of energy this thing can swell up to, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And it's about reminding ourselves too, and I think this is, I have a feeling, I'm not gonna speak for anybody, but I feel this for everybody, that I don't think a single person walked out of that event, last Saturday, not feeling like anything is possible, not feeling like we get to take back some of the control that we've lost in our grief and in our pain. And like I actually tend to believe wholeheartedly what you're saying is true, that, like with the people that are behind this, with the Randys and the Ryans of the world, like really never backing down from putting this event on and doing whatever it takes to get the community together. I do believe that next year there'll be 1,000, in 10 years there'll be 10,000, and that we can continue to grow it, and that the real pathway to ending this epidemic and the real pathway to like changing the reality in our communities is that that groundswell of like just people power, right? Of people getting vulnerable, inspiring one another, holding each other through grief and sadness and anger, and translating those things into something more powerful, right? And it's like being in that space was just, it's something that like it will reverberate through me for like months to come, right? Until the next opportunity to be in those spaces. And it's like there's a bigger picture here that anybody who's listening, hopefully will take away is like, get involved, you know what I mean? Even if it's just showing up. If you're sitting at home right now thinking about your experiences and what you've been through in life and how the system has fucked you over and how addiction crippled you and all these things, it's like what I learn every time I go to one of these events is just show up. And like, don't even show up with expectations, just show up because what's
You
gonna
always feel,
happen.
but you always it's always like, "Man, I'm so glad I
Yeah.
went. I'm so glad I was a part of that."
And I think I can participate and make a difference even if
Yeah,
just by showing up and telling my story,
yeah.
right? Because that's really the thing. If we kind of like, you know, reverse the tape backwards 10, 20, 30 years, the thing that has kept all of our communities, all of our marginalized communities separated and isolated is like this fear to acknowledge the reality, right? And if
Mm.
you think about 10 years ago, I mean, I think about, here's a good question for you, right? 15 years ago, when you were starting this journey, like not only was there not a lot of work and community happening, but like how many people were at front and center telling their stories, right? That is the most powerful thing
Yeah,
about this event is like there was nobody that didn't wanna hear the person next to them's story,
right.
and it's not like a competition either, it's like, let's just share our experience
Yeah.
over the real shit we've been through, and you have a stage where people can get up and inspire everybody else that, like, "I'm gonna tell you my story to empower you to tell yours," because only through telling our stories, every opportunity we get, are people gonna start to view us in our, like, fullness, our humanity, right? Like, even despite the tough shit.
Well, let's have another thing is that the door was on stage
Yeah.
up there during the whole event, which was pretty wild. I see all these pictures of the performers and the
Mhm.
speakers and stuff like that. It's all in front of the door, man. I
Yeah.
was like, man, like this thing is going all over the place, man. I was like, you know what I mean? That also was another thing. Is like I got to tell a story of like traveling the door around the country.
Mhm.
We gave out a few T-shirts and stuff, but like that was another piece of it for me. It's like, man, the doors up here on the stage and
Yeah.
everything. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Yeah, that
kind of, it was, it was pretty fun.
it is a huge win, you know what I'm saying? And
Part
that's
of it.
that's like just to come back to like that intersectional component of like this event is, I'm just gonna shout out a couple things. Like I saw a guy at the event who I was in prison for my whole time with, who did 30 something years, got out like 4 days before the event and was there, right? I saw another guy that I was in prison with who did like 10 years for a crime that happened when he was like 18, who recently lost some family members to overdose, who was there to share in the power, right? Like we understand, and what we've always understood with this, with this project we're doing with Behind the Door podcast, with all the places we go with the door, is that this door doesn't just symbolize incarceration. It symbolizes all the broken systems that feed mass incarceration. It symbolizes the mental health crisis. It symbolizes the opiate epidemic and the crack epidemic of the 80s and all these things.
Yeah, I was in the prison system and people were overdosing in the
In the
same
system.
cells. It was in the prison that people died. I was in the prison they were dying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like like that impacted us when we was, you know what I mean? It was in a maximum security prison and people were dying
Mhm.
from drugs in there. So it was like, it was really kind of fitting for me that it was up there and like that now it's like hopefully how people look at it is like, man, it's a hope we got this thing all out of there, man. It's like
Mhm.
that's this for all of us, man. We're gonna take control back of this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's such for the community, and this is where like it's important to recognize is like for the community of like 500 people that were there probably wasn't more than a handful of people that didn't know exactly what this was, right? Because even though we want to try to segment our societal issues into one group or another, the reality is that people struggling with mental health, people struggling with addiction, people struggling with poverty, all know what this thing is because this is the quote unquote solution that we throw at all our social problems, right? We believe we can incarcerate our way out of our social issues. And so to have the door on stage
No,
and have people, like I just want to just say if you listen to the last episode and you haven't taken the time to look up Kalichi or to look up Benjamin Lerner, do yourself a favor and look these guys
yeah,
up.
Swag killed it too, man.
And then the real, yeah,
Don't forget
the
about
real young
King.
swag, you know what I mean? Like if you don't know these folks,
Look,
look,
Page too, check him out. He's
yeah,
up there on the mic too.
yeah,
Getting to this.
yeah. Look these people up because as they perform their art,
Sarah Violet wasn't there either.
yeah,
She's fire too.
she is fire.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Shout out to Sarah Violet.
Sarah Violet.
The whole point is that like people came and shared their craft, which is high level, right? Like this is not like a recreational activity for them. Like they are actual incredible musicians with incredible stories to tell.
Yeah.
And they shared those stories in front of this prison door.
Yeah, it was wild.
Right?
Cool.
They shared those stories, they shared that craft in front of the door that you were behind
That was wild.
in your last incarceration. And so think about that. If
Yeah.
when you were locked up in cell number 18 at the Maine Correctional Center, all those years ago, looking out this window, and we always joke about banging on the door saying, I need some goddamn toilet paper, but could you ever have imagined in your wildest dreams
No, not even.
looking out this cell window?
Not even a little bit, man. That's what I mean. It was like, it was a humbling thing, like seeing the door up there, and then, you know what I mean, like being a part of it, and like watching the whole thing grow, and then like also being, you know what I mean. It was, people come up to me they came up to me at the event and said, man, they told me how much the podcast had meant to them, and like what it means, and like talking about the concept of it and like what we've been able to do with it. And it's like it was a pretty humbling experience in a lot of ways to see it up there and like and have a story to tell about it. Like that's unique, and like, sharing, conversations about like bringing the door up in front of the Lincoln Memorial and some of the stuff we did there. I'll never forget in my life. You know what I mean? Having that thing out in front of the Supreme Court, and then all of a sudden it's up here in Bangor, Maine. We had this thing all the way down Atlanta, Georgia, and then we're pushing it through Times Square. And then now here we are in Bangor, Maine, in front of 700 of our homies. You know what I'm saying? It was like, it was a pretty cool thing to have it up there and be a part of something like that. You know what I mean?
And because sometimes all it takes is a symbol of hope, right? To really like organize people around like what we're actually fighting for. And I just want, like maybe you're tuning in for the first time and maybe you've listened to every episode that we've ever put out. But like one thing that I just want to pause and acknowledge and recognize is like this shit is real, right? Like when people see this door, sometimes it's lost on them, right? Because it's a very clear symbol of something. But when they see the door and we tell them it's a prison door, the next thing that really makes it so real and like it's your door,
Right.
and I don't think that the weight of that is really something that like a lot of people understand even how to sit with. And like what you just recapped about Behind the Doors journey to this point in time, right? To this day in March of 2025, what's kind of lost is like we've been able to bring this door so many cool places, and that it culminated. Our most recent thing was that it was on stage at the Black Balloon Day Memorial for Mainers in front of like 500 plus people. But it's your fucking prison door. Right? And so like that is the part that this is why we do it, so that people can understand like not only that your personal story is a story of hope and a journey of like, in a lot of ways, excellence, right? That you've gone from being behind this door to now being somebody who serves the community, and then being in a space with your old prison door where hundreds of people are serving the community and coming together. But like the past of this door matters to give the context of the future of this door, right? And that's
hopefully it just continues to help build community. You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Like it's a symbol of that. Like we can't actually get this thing off here. It's like it's important to talk about. It's important to build community around, because there are people that are still struggling inside the system that might not never get out. That's like gonna return because they can't handle it out here. It's like we gotta have hope in somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully being able to navigate this thing throughout the country and wherever it goes next is like it's a pretty special thing, and to have it be involved is like with such a powerful event as the Black Balloon Day up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And what I hope that people always take away from, any interaction they have with like us about the podcast or with, any interaction they have with the door, with you hearing your story and, us kind of collectively telling the story of like why and what this means, because I think it's something that we'll probably forever be wrapping our heads around too. Like, what does this actually mean and how has it evolved into something, bigger than just the day you went and picked up the door from the prison, right? But what I always hope, and for anybody that's listening, what I really hope you take away from it is like really think about the trajectory of that journey, right? That it wasn't that long ago. It might feel like a lifetime that, 15, 16 years ago you were behind this
I would
door.
really like to be. I mean, I would like to be. I'd like to make a part of other events. Yeah, if there's other events, anybody wants us to bring it to, get in contact with us, and we'll come out, man. Well, we do crazy stuff at the drop of a dime, man. We'll show up, man. You know what I mean? We'll show up. So, you know what I mean? I loved having it there. It's like a really, like I said, it's a humbling thing. I'll chase that stuff down sometimes, you know.
And it's a symbol, right? Like basically what the door means and what like I always, the most interesting moments of my life to me to this point have been that like it's so stupid and minuscule, right? But like the process of actually wheeling the door out to your truck
Yeah.
and picking it up and pushing it in the back of your truck, no matter where we're coming from. Like we did it from the steps of the Supreme Court. I have this vivid memory of like you parking in a made up parking spot next to the Supreme Court of the United States of America and us wheeling this thing to the steps of the Supreme Court and then wheeling it back and it's loud as shit. And there's police officers looking at us and people in suits wondering what the hell's going on. And then we lift it up and we push it in the back of your truck and we drive away. Right. And the same thing happened in Bangor this weekend. We wheeled it out of this church, out of this big event after everything winds down, and we lift it up and we push it in your truck. And what I realize every time we do it in that moment, and like this is so fresh for me because we're right off the heels of Black Balloon Day. What I realize in that moment is you have been able to take the most oppressive thing that has ever happened to you and reclaim it and use it to tell the story of why we don't have to accept these realities, right? And so like for anybody that needs any symbol of hope, think about that process of us wheeling your prison door out to your truck, sliding it in, and then driving off to whatever the next outrageous event that we get to go to is where the door is front and center, right? How much more hope do you need? If not in that. And that's what I believe. I believe in the power of this podcast. I believe in the power of this message. I believe in the power of this piece of shit prison door because it can literally inspire people to know that what is the worst thing that has ever happened to you? What is the symbol of oppression that sticks in your mind? You can reclaim it. And it might not be a physical reclamation like you were able to obtain this door, but you can reclaim the experience and frame it so that you can go back to the turning the grief into growth, turning the pain you experienced into your power to tell your story and not ever allow anybody to hide from your truth. Because that's what this door does. And I think that's what this door did at Black Balloon Day on the stage in front of hundreds and hundreds of people is it doesn't allow anybody to hide from the truth of what this door does and what it represents, but that we've evolved past it and we've reclaimed it. And that's like a super special thing, man. I don't know how, how you were feeling after Black Balloon Day driving off with this in your truck. But like that's something that always sits with me is like people ask us, why the fuck would you do this? Why would you want your prison door? And like now after, I don't know, we've been going a year and a half now, my answer is why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to take a piece of you back instead of leaving it behind? Just and like even if it's just telling a story that you're not supposed to tell, right? It's like an act of defiance in a lot of ways. And I think every single person that hit that stage at Black Balloon Day and touched that microphone, I think every single person that didn't hit the stage but told their story to somebody around them, that's what they were doing, right? They were reclaiming a piece of themselves that is supposed to be lost,
Yeah.
that society wants us to lose.
Yeah. This is like like a tangible, visual thing that you can just, you know what I mean? It's But I really just, I was just humbled to be there, man. It was like, just to be a small part of the community
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, you are a part of something and that our stories do matter and that, you know what I mean, people, that we can honor and grieve together when people pass away and that, like, collectively we can heal up, you know?
Yeah. And one thing I wanna point out, because I was thinking about this when we first started this conversation, you brought up a really good point, which is like, 15 years ago, there wasn't stuff like this around. There wasn't all these organizations, all these people working from the boots on the ground, grassroots level to organize care and community for their, for their community, right? And sometimes I get discouraged, and it's easy to get discouraged to think like, God damn, man, like in the last 5 years, we lost like 2,000 plus people to overdose.
Mm.
And I remember the first Black Balloon Day I went to, it was like 500, and then the next one was like 616 or something like that. And this year it's even more.
Mm.
And, like I find oftentimes that it's easy to get discouraged, like to feel like we're not chipping away at it. But the reality that I've come to know in this conversation is that we might have had a record year of overdose deaths in the state this year, but imagine how many more it would have been if it wasn't for everybody who was at Black
It's not
Balloon Day.
nearly enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have made good progress with it, but it's not nearly enough, you know what I mean? Like, I can remember when it was like the numbers were, everybody was, really scared because it was, the number was half of what it is
Like
now.
one person
Like
a
the
day.
way it
Yeah.
comes down, you know what I mean? Like so we have a lot more work to do,
Yeah.
and that's why these events and the community building and you know what I mean, the family building, stuff like that, that's the thing that's gonna help us the most. I can't say this enough, is like, no one's coming to save us except for us and the community if we don't grow it.
Yeah.
The more people, the more events like this we have, and the more energy is spread and connected to, the better off our community is going to be. The
Yeah.
more people will heal.
And that's the biggest thing, I think the biggest takeaway, right, is no matter how you're feeling, no matter how discouraged you are by the numbers, what this event really teaches us is like the work has to keep going. And we can't ever rest and say like, okay, we've done enough,
Right.
right? Because one thing we know is that this is something that people will struggle with, and the biggest thing that can get them out of the struggle is the community, is the presence of like energy like we experience at Black Balloon Day. And I just want to, as we conclude this episode, just give like another shout out to everybody who helped organize Black Balloon Day. If you played any part in organizing that event, shout out to the people that we know at the front of it, the Ryan Pages and the Randy Beards and the Shay Dufours, and all these people that we actually see doing the work, to put an event like this on. But even if you were behind the scenes doing any aspect of it, like thank
Man, the Ricky was
yeah,
driving a bus on that thing. I know she was probably doing all the heavy
yeah,
lifting, organizing stuff.
yeah. Shout out to Amanda.
Yeah, she was. She did a lot of good work for him,
Yeah.
guys. You know.
And just we behind the door podcast, Jeremy Hiltz and Brandon Brown expressed gratitude to
She
everybody who
also,
was there.
Amanda Ricci, she also has Franklin County in Franklin County, Maine. She has a recovery residence up there. She does IOP and all that stuff. Her program is Lifeline for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're doing a lot of good work up there too.
Yeah. And so thank you. You know what I mean? Thank you, Amanda. Thank you to everybody that's doing this work. Thank you to everybody who came to Black Balloon Day, who shared your story, who just like sat with us in community. And, I can't wait like I say that cautiously. I can't wait for the next one, like
Yeah.
just to be in community, obviously to also collectively grieve and do that, but to continue to see how in our state and even in states beyond, like the collective power of people who have been marginalized grows is something that I'm always going to be excited about. And it was an honor and a privilege to be at Black Balloon Day, to be on the stage speaking and to have the door up there. And, just thank you to everybody who was there and who played a part in it. And, keep tuning in, and we're going to keep having these conversations and uplifting the realities and the struggles and the hope and the inspiration that we see everywhere we get to go with this door, man. It's really a special thing to be a part of.